Today we're going to talk about a few lighting techniques that I use when I don't necessarily have a bunch of lighting equipment. So a lot of these techniques are just really my personal preference when it comes to lighting. It's more my style, and so these are not hard and fast rules. I really only use these when they make sense for that particular project. I think this thought process has really helped me. There are times when you have complete control, a decent budget, and a decent amount of time, and so you can really make it look exactly the way that you want it to look. And then honestly, there are a lot of times where you have way less time, way less budget, and way less gear than you'd like. And on top of it, maybe a crappy location. For example, on this Adidas campaign that I shot earlier this year, we were in a couple different cities, and specifically when we were in Kansas, we were in the basketball stadium for the Kansas Jayhawks. And my approach to lighting this was, again, just doing exactly what I said. We were able to shut all the stadium lights off. There's actually some really beautiful windows up at the top that we were getting some natural backlight from. And so mainly what I did for this particular shot was I just talked with the director and placed the talent where we wanted him so that we could get him backlit as much as possible. This gave it a lot of contrast because we didn't have any of the bright stadium lights pointing directly down at him, making him look super flat. Now we had a bunch of shadow on his face, and then we had a bunch of backlight coming through those top windows. If we had turned around and we had shot the other way, we would have been front lighting him and it would have just looked super flat. So that's why it's important to talk with your director. I think a lot of times, like I said, we don't always have as much control as we'd like, but at the end of the day, whoever's watching whatever you're shooting is only seeing exactly what you're pointing your camera at. Moving on to a different project, this was the Japan documentary that I made a breakdown for. It's still not out yet, and funny enough, we had actually already wrapped, but I still, deep down inside, wasn't fully in love with the way that it looked, because what we were doing was actually, we shot with these doors open right here. You could kind of see into their house, even though it was still dimly lit, and again, I had controlled as much light as possible, turning off everything except for that one ceiling light that I wanted. And then as we were leaving, we were closing up their house, and I noticed how nice and backlit and beautiful their silhouettes looked. It kind of had removed that ugly top lighting that I really was settling for. And I asked Ethan, our director, if we could just roll through the scene one more time, since this project is a little bit more abstract and we could take a little bit of leeway with redoing things. And then for this project, this is one that is not out yet as well. It's actually one that I directed and also DP'd. But for this one, I really wanted to really push the look of it, do it a little bit different than how I would normally light something and how I would normally move the camera. And so then for this one, when we got to the location, we turned all the lights off. I wanted everything to really fall deep into the shadows, and I wanted the highlights to burn really hot. I was going for a very old school vintage, like 1950s noir look, and I was able to accomplish it with just one light using that method of turning everything off and building it back the way that I want it to look. I personally really like those contrasty looking images, and so I'm not always looking to preserve all of my shadow details. I think maybe sometimes people are afraid of pushing an image too far in one direction that you can't save it in post. You know, saving every ounce of information in the sensor is not necessarily what I'm looking for. And then this is from a project that I shot earlier this year in Portugal. We were in a hospital. This was another scenario where we didn't have a huge team, we didn't have a huge crew, and we didn't have a ton of control in our locations. Again, all I did was I turned off all of the lights and then I brought back what I needed. In short, all I'm saying is when you don't have enough budget, you don't have enough time, you don't have enough lights, really control what you can control, point the camera exactly where it needs to be pointed, and shape the light as much as you can. Oftentimes, it's better to just take things away than to always be, adding more light than you think you need. You don't need crazy huge setups with tons of people and tons of lights to make something that looks nice. So sometimes it really is just that simple. It's having an opinion, having a style that you know works for what you're trying to execute, and pushing that vision and working with the team that you have to make it come to life.